It is Saturday, April 4th. I'm Ali Velshi. You've probably heard by now, but the Trump mega loyalist and personal lawyer Pam Bondi is out as Attorney General. Some people are celebrating, pointing to her chaotic tenure that turned the Justice Department into Trump's personal vendetta machine. But one shouldn't get too comfortable. Donald Trump's reported shortlist to replace Bondi doesn't suggest that either reform or order is coming to the Justice Department. In fact, quite the opposite. You see, Pam Bondi was all about fealty. But it seems that fealty to Donald Trump itself is no longer enough in this administration. What Trump wants in an attorney general is a fixer. Blind fealty is just the starting point. The ceiling is how far you're willing to go. Bondi's downfall wasn't because she broke with Trump or grew a spine or struggled with a sense of justice in an administration that always seems to be skirting the law. It's not even that she pushed back, even a little. It seems Pam Bondi is gone because she didn't go far enough in protecting Donald Trump. She didn't run enough interference. She hadn't apparently gone hard enough against his enemies. As the old saying goes, she did a poor job of burying the bodies. Now, one might think this is about the Epstein files, which were central to her job since the day she was appointed. But a growing number of sources suggested that while she blundered her way through that central scandal, which may still ultimately be the undoing of this administration, her failure in Trump's eyes was actually more basic. Bondi simply couldn't deliver on persecuting and prosecuting Donald Trump's perceived enemies. On one hand, Bondi had fueled expectations that she couldn't meet, publicly claiming on Fox News last February that an Epstein client list was sitting on her desk waiting to be reviewed, her words, only to later entirely contradict herself, one might say lie, if one were feeling charitable, when she said that no such list existed. That credibility gap never closed. That wound never healed. It's what we called an unforced error, a big one. But that lie or obfuscation or whatever it was, serious though it was, wasn't what ultimately cost her her job. Sources told MS Now that Bondi was fired because Trump grew dissatisfied with her inability to prosecute his perceived enemies, a list that includes New York Attorney General Letitia James, former FBI Director James Comey, Jerome Powell, whom Trump appointed as Fed chair, but who refused to cut interest rates on demand, California Senator Adam Schiff, who prosecuted Donald Trump during one of his impeachments, the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, the former Trump administration officials, Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor, the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, even the former president, Bill Clinton, and 6 members of Congress whose so-called crime of treason was recording a video informing members of the military and the intelligence community that they are not obligated to follow illegal orders. According to New York Times reporting, in the final weeks of her tenure, Bondi, aware that her days might be numbered, tried to win back favor by targeting individuals that Trump had singled out, including the former Obama CIA director, John Brennan, and the former White House aide turned whistleblower, Cassidy Hutchinson. But even that was not enough. And that says something important about what the role of the Attorney General of the United States has become. These aggressive, selective, vindictive, and legally dubious efforts weren't being driven by traditional prosecutors. Instead, they were led by political henchmen willing to do the dirty work, combing through financial records, loan applications, insurance forms, and any other material they could use against specific targets. Take the campaign targeting New York Attorney General Letitia James, a longtime Trump target. James successfully sued the Trump Organization in 2022 for more than 200 instances of fraud spanning a decade. Behind the renewed efforts to nab James on possible mortgage fraud was a guy named Bill Pulte. This guy, he's a close Trump ally and a federal housing official who comes from the billionaire Pulte real estate family, which is a story unto itself. Pulte publicly inserted himself into the campaign against James, digging into her mortgage loan applications, and after 3 failed attempts to prosecute her, he then filed 2 new criminal referrals. Unsurprisingly, Pulte was reportedly one of Bondi's biggest critics. According to the New York Times, they believed he had long pushed for her firing, blaming department leadership for slow-walking and bungling the James and Comey cases, among other things, according to people familiar with the situation. That's the model they're building. Not building cases from evidence, but searching for and twisting evidence to fit the target. And all of this is unfolding against a broader backdrop. On Friday, Trump announced via Truth Social that Vice President J.D. Vance will serve as the nation's so-called fraud czar, overseeing a sweeping anti-fraud push with a mandate extending everywhere. Literally, that's the quote. But in Trump's words, quote, primarily in those blue states where crooked Democrat politicians have misused taxpayer funds. To be clear, this whole thing has its roots in Minnesota, where Trump has launched a blatantly racist attack against the sizable Somali community there. The administration has seized on fraud allegations to politicize the issue, using them as a pretext to target Democrat-led states. Vance will chair a new White House anti-fraud task force, which will include a representative from the Justice Department, linking the White House and the Department of Justice in a way that raises questions about independence and the real aims of this initiative. This task force follows another DOJ unit announced earlier this year, which Trump claims will investigate fraud and will report directly to him and Vance. The administration presents these efforts as a crackdown on fraud, but the infrastructure being created is unusual and troubling. As the Democratic Senator Chris Coons warns, quote, I'm concerned that the administration is less concerned with specifically fighting fraud than with targeting people and states it dislikes or that it has a partisan agenda against, end quote. According to NPR, the DOJ unit will operate in close coordination with the White House, even as existing anti-fraud, tax, and public integrity units have been weakened or dismantled. These units already existed within the Department of Justice. Perry Carbone, a former federal prosecutor, explains, quote, the Justice Department has historically operated with meaningful independence from the White House in individual enforcement matters. When you have statements like we have suggesting that any new fraud enforcement office would be answerable to the White House, that raises legitimate concerns. If the Justice Department wanted to increase fraud prosecutions, then they should be taking action to strengthen enforcement and not weakening it. The way that should be done is through the existing structure instead of cutting resources to the fraud section, end quote. And by the way, this fealty purge or effectiveness purge is not happening in a vacuum. The admitted puppy killer who was acting as the Department of Homeland Security's secretary was the first to go, and Trump is said to be considering broader cabinet changes. Politico reports that he's very angry with officials he believes have underperformed or drawn negative attention, signaling a potential major reset across the administration ahead of November's midterm elections that are looking increasingly ominous for this administration. Officials reportedly on thin ice include the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, the Labor Secretary, Lori Chavez DeRemer, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the aviation enthusiast and FBI Director, Kash Patel. Meanwhile, Trump has reportedly floated the idea of replacing Pam Bondi with Lee Zeldin, the current EPA administrator and one of Trump's most reliable foot soldiers, or the Fox News host and former prosecutor Jeanine Pirro, or the woefully inexperienced Trump defense lawyer, and there are a lot of those, by the way, so I'll name her, Alina Habba, or the former Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt, a Christian nationalist who generally doesn't like immigrants but seems fine with German immigrants since that's what his grandparents were. There are 340 million people in this country. 1.3 million of them are licensed attorneys. And this is the short list we've got. Taken together, this appears less like routine turnover and more like a recalibration around a single question. Who is delivering for Trump? Bondi's ouster is just one part of the story. It signals a broader, more troubling shift in how the administration is structuring enforcement, oversight, and the rule of law in this country. So don't celebrate the firing of Pam Bondi. What and who comes next could mark a significant escalation from what we've already seen.